He was just a small-town cop until a 911 call changed his life forever. In the quiet town of Millbrook, nestled between amber fields and aging oaks, Officer John Harris was known for two things: his unwavering dedication to duty and the heavy silence that followed him like a shadow. Ever since his wife Sarah passed away 10 years ago, John had become a fixture in the community, patrolling the same streets day after day, exchanging polite smiles, but never really letting anyone in. People respected him, but no one truly knew him anymore. That all changed one chilly October afternoon. The sun had barely begun to dip behind the church steeple when the radio crackled to life in John's cruiser. All units, report of possible child abandonment. 1456 Elm Street. Neighbors heard crying. Proceed with caution. John's hand froze over the coffee cup resting in his lap. Elm Street. That run-down 2-story house at the end of the block. He'd passed it 100 times, never once imagining what he was about to find inside. He pulled up moments later, the worn tires of his cruiser crunching against the gravel. The house looked abandoned, windows cracked, paint peeling, the yard overgrown. But then he heard it. A faint sound. Crying. "Police!" John called out, knocking firmly. No response. The crying grew louder, more desperate. He tried the doorknob, unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with silence and sorrow. The furniture was sparse, the lights off, and in the far corner of the living room, huddled together beneath a torn blanket, were 6 little girls. Their eyes widened in fear as he stepped in, wary, silent, guarded. The oldest, maybe 12, stepped in front of the others as if to shield them. Her dark braids were neat, her back straight, despite the chaos surrounding her. "It's okay," John said gently, kneeling to their level. "I'm here to help." The girl looked him in the eye, her voice trembling. "Our parents, they died. Car accident. No one's come." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. John radioed for Child Protective Services and backup, but as he waited, he couldn't tear his eyes away from the children. 6 young girls. No extended family, no home, no one left. He should have walked away, should have done what the system demanded, file the report, hand them over, and move on. But something inside him, something buried deep under layers of grief and lost time, cracked open. That night, as the girls were temporarily placed in foster care, John tossed and turned in bed. He saw their faces every time he closed his eyes. He remembered the trembling in the oldest girl's voice, the toddler clinging to her shirt, the absolute terror of being alone in a world that had already taken too much from them. By morning, he made a decision that would change not only their lives, but his. "I want to adopt them," he said, standing in the middle of the Child Protective Services office, shocking the social workers into stunned silence. "All 6? Linda Collins, the lead caseworker, asked, blinking. "Officer Harris, you're a single man, white. These girls are black. You realize the cultural challenges, the trauma, the scrutiny." "I do," John interrupted. "But I also know what it's like to lose everything, and I won't let them lose each other too." It wasn't just a choice. It was a calling. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. Whispers began almost immediately. At the station, in the grocery store, even at church. "He's not equipped. It's just white guilt. They need a black family to understand their culture. It'll never work." But John kept showing up at court hearings, parenting classes, cultural competency workshops. He read books on black hair care. He asked questions he once would have been afraid to ask. He didn't pretend to be their savior. He just wanted to be their father. It wasn't easy. The girls had scars, deep, invisible ones. They tested him, doubted him, pushed him away. They asked hard questions about identity, belonging, and race. But every day, John showed up. With peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, with bedtime stories, with trembling hands learning how to braid. Slowly, love began to replace fear. The oldest, Amara, started calling him dad. The youngest, Jasmine, would run to him when she scraped her knee. They laughed together, cried together, prayed together. And when they walked through the streets of Millbrook, John, a tall white man in uniform followed by 6 radiant black girls, they became a sight that made people pause. Not out of mockery, but because something about them felt right. 20 years later, John Harris's home would no longer be a place of silence. It would be filled with laughter, music, and the occasional chaos of mismatched shoes and overlapping birthdays. But all of that started with one choice. One broken man, one abandoned home, one decision to love beyond the boundaries of blood, culture, and expectation. And that was only the beginning. The badge taught him discipline, but fatherhood taught him love. The first few weeks were chaos. John Harris, once a man whose life was ruled by routine and radio calls, now found himself in a whirlwind of mismatched socks, spilled cereal, and tearful bedtime stories. His once silent home echoed with laughter, music, squabbles, and the occasional shriek of a dropped spaghetti bowl. And yet, for the first time in years, he felt alive. But being a cop hadn't prepared him for this, not even close. There were moments when John stood in front of 6 heads of wild, beautiful curls with a brush in one hand and YouTube tutorials in the other, completely overwhelmed. Detangle first, Amara would remind him, stifling a giggle as he fumbled with a jar of coconut oil. He learned quickly, don't pull too hard, don't skip conditioner, and for the love of all things holy, never touch a black girl's hair without permission. Cooking was another battlefield. He burnt the cornbread 3 times before Mother Henrietta from the local black church took pity on him and invited him to a Sunday potluck. There, he met grandmothers and aunties who'd raised generations. They taught him the difference between collard greens and turnip greens, between sweet tea and real sweet tea. But more than that, they taught him to listen. He listened as they shared stories of segregation, silent prayers whispered during traffic stops, and the ache of watching their children navigate a world not built for them. He listened as his daughters began to share too, slowly, cautiously, about classmates who made comments, teachers who underestimated them, and the ever-present weight of being different in a town that didn't always understand. John could feel the sting in their voices. The world they lived in was not the one he had known, so he took them to church. Not just any church, but their church, the one their parents had once attended. The music was different, the sermons passionate, the pews alive with spirit. He was the only white face in the room, and at first he felt every pair of eyes on him. But he kept coming, week after week. He sat beside his girls as they swayed to the choir, clapped on beat, and found something he couldn't give them himself, a piece of home. It wasn't always easy. There were stares at the grocery store, whispers behind hands. Some called him a white savior. Others doubted his intentions. He heard the word experiment thrown around more than once, but John didn't flinch. Because every night, when little Jasmine climbed into his lap with her favorite stuffed giraffe, or when Zoe, the quiet one, handed him her latest book report with a proud smile, he was reminded why he did this. It wasn't to be seen as heroic. It was because he loved them, with a love that didn't care about skin tone or a love that showed up over and over again, even when it wasn't convenient or comfortable. As months turned to years, John stopped being the cop who took in those black girls. He became simply dad, and in learning to love beyond his experience, John Harris was slowly becoming the father his daughters never thought they'd find, and the man he never dreamed he could be. But the world outside their door wasn't done testing that bond. Not yet. They said he'd never understand, but he chose to love anyway. The Harris household was filled with laughter, bedtime stories, and love. But even the warmest home couldn't protect the girls from the world outside. As the 6 sisters grew older, so did the shadows of prejudice they had been born into. School hallways became battlegrounds. Supermarket stairs turned sharper. And no matter how well John braided hair or showed up at every parent-teacher conference, there were some wounds even a father's love couldn't prevent. It started subtly. A comment from a classmate. "Are you really his daughter?" A side glance from a teacher. A whispered slur at basketball tryouts. But over time, the microaggressions added up, carving doubt into hearts that were once so full of childlike certainty. The girls were navigating 2 worlds, one where they were too black, and another where they were not black enough. And as much as John tried to understand, there were moments when his white skin was a barrier, not because of his love, but because of the world's brokenness. Tiana, the 3rd oldest, felt it the most. She was bold, athletic, and had a fire in her spirit that reminded John of her late mother, a woman he'd never met but imagined often. Tiana loved hard and pushed back harder. And beneath her confidence was a deep yearning to belong. One afternoon, John came home to find her bedroom empty. Her basketball jersey was gone. Her sneakers, too. A note lay on her bed. "I'm sorry, I just need to figure out who I am. Please, don't come looking." John's heart stopped. Panic set in as hours passed. He called friends, the school, even hospitals. Nothing. The other girls tried to stay strong. But Jasmine cried herself to sleep that night, clutching the stuffed giraffe Tiana had given her on her birthday. It wasn't until 3 a.m. that the call came. A bus station 2 towns over. A tired, scared teenager sitting alone on a bench. When John arrived, Tiana wouldn't look him in the eye. He didn't scold, didn't demand answers. He just knelt in front of her, wrapped his arms around her trembling frame, and whispered, "You never have to run to be heard. I'm listening, always." She broke down in his arms. In that moment, on a cold metal bench under flickering fluorescent lights, John realized that love meant more than protection. It meant humility. It meant admitting what he didn't know. It meant being willing to hold space for pain he couldn't fully understand. Back home, with the other girls asleep, John and Tiana sat on the porch swing. "I'm tired, Dad," she said softly. "Tired of explaining why I exist, why I don't fit in. People look at us and don't see family. They see confusion, pity, judgment." John nodded, his throat tight. "You know I love you," he said. "I know," she whispered. "But love doesn't make the world fair." No, it didn't. But John believed it could make the world bearable. And maybe, with time, love could even start to change it. He made her a promise that night, not just to protect, but to learn, to listen, to stand beside her in the face of every whisper, every raised eyebrow, every injustice. And he did. He attended racial justice workshops at the church, read books the girls recommended, asked hard questions, and wrestled with harder truths. He didn't always get it right, but he never stopped showing up. And slowly, something shifted. Tiana began to open up more. She wrote essays about her experience, spoke at school assemblies. She didn't hide her identity. She claimed it. And her sisters, emboldened by her courage, began to do the same. Their house became a haven, not just for them, but for others. Friends who didn't feel seen found belonging there. Teachers who didn't understand came to learn. Even skeptics in the town softened when they saw what love looked like in real life. Not perfect, not polished, but relentless. But for John, the greatest victory wasn't in changing anyone's mind. It was in watching his daughters rise. Scarred, yes, but standing tall. Women who knew their worth, who had been through fire and come out shining. Years later, at a local town hall, Tiana stood at the microphone during a community discussion on race and equity. She paused, looking out at the crowd, then over at John sitting in the front row. "I used to think he'd never understand," she said, her voice steady. "And maybe he never fully will. But he chose to try, to learn, to stay. And in a world that often walks away, that choice means everything." John's eyes filled with tears. He had spent his career protecting others. But these girls, his girls, they had protected something in him too. His faith, his hope, his belief in what a family could be. And though the journey was far from over, one thing had become clear. Love doesn't fix everything, but it fights for everything. And that fight, fueled by grace, truth, and stubborn, inconvenient, soul-deep love, was one John Harris would never stop showing up for. Not now. Not ever. 2 decades had passed since that life-altering day when John Harris, a lonely widowed cop, stepped into a decaying house and found 6 frightened little girls. 20 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, parent-teacher conferences, proms, graduations, and Sunday dinners. The once quiet home had grown into a place overflowing with music, opinions, and love. But time, with all its gifts, never comes without cost. John was in his early 60s now. The girls, Amara, Simone, Tiana, Zoe, Layla, and Jasmine, had blossomed into extraordinary women. Their lives were full of purpose. Social workers, artists, athletes, activists. Yet John, the man who had carried them through every storm, had been quietly facing one of his own. It started with a cough, dry, persistent. He brushed it off as allergies, or maybe just age catching up to him. But then came the fatigue, the kind that sleep couldn't fix, and the weight loss, Clothes that used to fit now hung loose on his frame. Still, John said nothing. He told himself he didn't want to worry the girls. They were busy building lives, chasing dreams. He didn't want to be a burden. He convinced himself he could power through like he always had, like a good father, like a man. But cancer doesn't care how strong you are. On a warm Saturday afternoon, during a backyard barbecue to celebrate Zoe's acceptance into a prestigious writing program, John collapsed near the grill. The sound of laughter turned to screams as his daughters rushed to his side, panic in every movement. The hospital confirmed what he had long suspected, but never said aloud: stage 3 lung cancer, aggressive, advanced. When John opened his eyes in the hospital bed, he was met with 6 tear-streaked faces surrounding him. "Dad," Amara whispered, gripping his hand tightly, "why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't want to scare you girls," he said weakly, his voice breaking. "You've all been through enough." Simone leaned in, her eyes burning with quiet rage and love. "We're not those little girls in the corner anymore. We're your daughters. You raised us to be strong. For you." From that day forward, the girls became his warriors. Amara, with her background in social work, immediately took over his care coordination. She researched oncologists, clinical trials, alternative therapies. No stone was left unturned. Simone, the artist, transformed his hospital room into a sanctuary of color and hope. She painted murals of home, of porch swings and sunsets, and hung them on the sterile white walls. Tiana, now a coach, handled his physical strength. On his good days, she helped him walk around the hospital garden. On his bad days, she sat by his side and reminded him what endurance looked like. Zoe brought him books, stories of resilience, love, and laughter. She read to him until he fell asleep, the soft cadence of her voice calming his anxious mind. Layla took to activism, organizing community fundraisers and lung cancer awareness campaigns. She turned pain into purpose, raising thousands for research while rallying others to take their health seriously. And Jasmine, the baby, never left his side. She was his constant, his smile, his soft landing on the hardest nights. She curled up beside him during chemo, holding his hand, whispering stories, singing softly, just like he used to for her. Their once quiet home became a battleground of hope. Schedules were coordinated, meals were prepared with nutrition plans, treatments were tracked down to the minute. Every decision, every tear, every ounce of energy was poured into the man who had once poured everything into them. John tried to protest. "You girls don't have to do this." But Amara would always respond, "No, Dad, we get to." For the first time in years, the girls were all under one roof again. And even amid the uncertainty, there was beauty in it. Late-night conversations, laughter echoing through the halls. The family that had formed by choice had now become an unbreakable force of love. But it wasn't easy. Chemo was brutal. There were days when John couldn't get out of bed, when food tasted like metal, when he looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. And still, the girls never wavered. One evening, after a particularly hard round of treatment, John sat on the porch swing with Tiana. The stars stretched wide above them, and the cicadas hummed their nightly song. "I'm scared, Tiana," he said softly. She reached over, took his hand in hers, strong, calloused from years on the court, and now, from holding his. "Me too, Dad. But we're in this together. Like always." John blinked back tears. "I don't want you girls to remember me like this. Sick, weak." Tiana smiled, her voice steady. "We don't remember you for your body, Dad. We remember your heart, your fight, your choice to love us when no one else did." Silence fell between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of truth, of memory, of love that had stood the test of time and now stood in defiance of mortality itself. As his health ebbed and flowed, word of John's battle began to spread through the town. The same people who once doubted his choice to adopt 6 black girls now lined up to donate, to support, to say thank you. The local paper ran a feature. Officer John Harris, a legacy of love, now in need of our love in return. His former partner, his church family, kids he'd mentored, parents of children his daughters had helped. They all came forward. They sent meals, cards, donations, prayers, and through it all, John, frail but still full of fire, kept saying the same thing. This isn't the end. This is another beginning. And he was right, because cancer didn't just test the strength of his body. It revealed the strength of his love, of their love, a love forged not by blood, but by choice, not bound by ease, but by commitment. And in the fight of his life, John Harris discovered something even more powerful than fear, more enduring than pain. He had raised 6 girls into warriors, and now those warriors were carrying him home. Months had passed since John Harris first heard the words that shook his world: stage 3 lung cancer. And while the road to recovery was anything but easy, he was still here. Stronger, thinner, grayer, but still John. He often said that he wasn't healing because of medicine alone. It was them. His girls. They'd been his nurses, drivers, cheerleaders, and quiet strength when his own ran dry. Their love wasn't loud. It was in every meal Amara prepped, every painting Simone taped above his hospital bed, every laugh Jasmine gifted him when he needed it most. Their love didn't ask for recognition, but John saw it in everything. Now, as spring returned to Millbrook, bringing with it longer days and softer breezes, John began feeling more like himself again. His voice grew steadier, his appetite returned, his steps grew firmer. Still, he had no idea what his daughters were planning. One Saturday afternoon, Amara suggested they have a family dinner at the local community center. "It's been a while since we were all together somewhere special," she said casually, hiding the excitement in her eyes. John agreed, thinking it was just another one of their sweet gestures. He had no clue that the community center, decorated with soft lights, family photos, and rows of chairs, was packed wall to wall with people whose lives he had touched over the years. As he stepped through the doors, the room erupted. "Surprise!" John froze, blinking in disbelief. Old police buddies, neighbors, church members, and even the principal from Zoe's elementary school all stood applauding. The girls stood at the center, dressed elegantly, beaming with pride. A large banner stretched across the stage, celebrating John Harris. Father, protector, hero. His knees nearly buckled, but Amara was at his side in an instant. What is all this?" he whispered. Simone grinned. "This is just the beginning." Layla stepped forward, clutching a beautifully wrapped box and a microphone. "Dad, tonight isn't just about thanking you. It's about continuing what you started. About taking your love and turning it into something that can help even more children, just like you helped us." She handed him the box. John opened it slowly to find a gold-framed certificate. The John Harris Foundation for Foster Care and Adoption. He stared at it stunned. Tears welled up in his eyes as he read the inscription. "In honor of a man who redefined what it means to be a father." A foundation dedicated to keeping siblings together, empowering adoptive families, and giving every child a chance at love, belonging, and a future. Jasmine stepped up next. "Dad, the foundation already has its first year fully funded. Community leaders, businesses, and even some of your former colleagues donated the moment they heard. You gave us everything, and now it's our turn to give back. In your name." The room fell silent as John clutched the certificate to his chest. Emotion overwhelmed him. I never did any of this for recognition," he said, his voice breaking. I saw 6 little girls who needed love, and I didn't realize how much I needed them too." He looked out across the crowd. "Family isn't built on blood. It's built on love, sacrifice, and choice. You all are my family, and these 6 amazing women." He gestured to his daughters. "They are my heart." The audience rose in a standing ovation. People cried. People smiled. Because they knew, in that room, they were witnessing something rare, a man being honored not for what he had, but for how he loved. That night, as the music played and stories were shared, John sat surrounded by the very legacy he never meant to build, but wouldn't trade for the world. A legacy built not on badges or titles, but on bedtime stories, broken braids, scraped knees, forgiveness, and second chances. The John Harris Foundation wasn't just a name on a paper. It was a promise. And it all started with one man who simply said yes. The seasons turned once more in Millbrook, and with them, so did the pages of life in the Harris household. Though John Harris had beaten cancer, the battle had changed him. He walked slower, breathed deeper, smiled more. Every moment with his daughters had become a gift. Every meal around the table a celebration of life, but nothing could have prepared him for what came next. It was Tiana, always the firebrand, always the one who tested boundaries, who brought the news. One chilly fall evening, she invited John to dinner. Just the two of them. No sisters, no fuss. That alone raised suspicion. They sat in her small but cozy apartment. Photos of the Harris family lined the walls. Baby pictures, graduations, basketball trophies, and hand-drawn birthday cards John had never known she kept. After dessert, Tiana cleared her throat, her fingers nervously wrapped around a tea mug. "Dad?" she said, her voice softer than usual. "There's something I want to tell you." John looked up, sensing the gravity. "What's going on, sweetheart?" She smiled, and for a brief second, he saw the little girl who once stormed out into the night, only to collapse in his arms, sobbing. Now she was a woman, strong, sure, and glowing with something new. "I'm going to have a baby," she said. John blinked, then blinked again. A baby?" he whispered, voice catching in his throat. Tiana nodded, eyes misty. "Yeah, Dad. You're going to be a grandpa." He didn't speak. Instead, he stood, walked around the table, and pulled her into his arms. No questions, no lectures. Just pure, silent joy. But then came the moment that hit him hardest. Tiana pulled back, smiling through tears. "We want to name her Sarah, after Mom." John's knees buckled slightly, and he had to sit. Sarah, his late wife, the woman who never got to see the family they dreamed of, the woman who somehow was still guiding them all, through memory, through love. "Thank you," he whispered. She would have loved that. The months passed in a blur of baby showers, nursery painting, and long family calls. All 6 sisters rallied around Tiana, just as they once rallied around John. Amara read parenting books cover to cover. Simone painted a mural of a starry night sky in the baby's room. Jasmine knitted booties. Layla organized a community fundraiser for single mothers. Zoe began writing a children's book in Sarah's name. John watched it all with wonder. He often sat in his old rocking chair, one hand resting on the armrest, the other on a new journal he kept beside him, pages filled with memories, lessons, and blessings he hoped to pass on. The day baby Sarah arrived, it was raining, but the world inside the delivery room was filled with warmth and light. Tiana, exhausted but glowing, looked at her father as the nurse gently placed the swaddled newborn into his arms. Tiny, pink, beautiful. "Hi there," John whispered, tears sliding down his weathered cheeks. "I'm your grandpa, and you, little one, are the newest chapter in a story that started a long time ago, with 6 brave little girls and 1 terrified cop who had no idea what he was doing." The room was quiet, save for the soft breaths of baby Sarah and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. "You're going to grow up surrounded by love," John continued, rocking gently. "Because this family, we don't give up on each other. Ever." So weeks later, the family gathered again. This time in the same church where John first brought the girls decades ago. It was baby Sarah's christening. Mother Henrietta, now in her 90s, but still spry as ever, performed the ceremony. And afterward, with baby Sarah in his arms and his daughters surrounding him, John stepped up to the podium. "I used to think life had passed me by," he said, his voice slow but full, "that the loss of my wife meant the end of family for me. But life had something better in store. It brought me 6 daughters, and now a granddaughter." He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't raise these girls because I'm some kind of hero. I raised them because they were mine. From the moment I walked into that broken house 25 years ago, they became mine. And today, as I hold my granddaughter, I feel Sarah, my wife, here with us. I feel her smiling." The congregation stood in quiet reverence. It wasn't just a family story anymore. It was a legacy, one built on courage, faith, and a love that defied every barrier. The years rolled on gently, like the Mississippi in the early morning light, calm, deep, and steady. John Harris, once a lonely cop with a haunted gaze, now woke each day surrounded by laughter, movement, and the gentle chaos that only a large, loving family can bring. His home had transformed. No longer the quiet, dusty house it once was, it pulsed with the spirit of life. Photos lined the walls, graduation caps, birthday candles, footballs, and finger paintings. The little girls he once rocked to sleep were now strong women carving out their place in the world. Amara, his oldest, had become the director of child services for the state. Fierce, determined, and grounded in empathy, she fought daily to ensure no child would be lost in the system the way she and her sisters nearly had been. "Dad gave me the tools," she once told a news outlet. "All I had to do was use them." Simone's artwork graced national galleries, bold pieces on identity and home, family and race. But her most treasured canvas remained the family room wall, where a giant hand-painted tree bloomed, each branch holding a portrait of their family members, real and chosen. Tiana, the daughter who once ran away, had become a community leader and coach, mentoring young black girls through sports and storytelling. Her blog, More Than Enough, became a sanctuary for thousands navigating racial identity and belonging. Zoe published books that captured the complexity of their lives with lyrical beauty. Layla served on city council, fighting for equity in housing and education. And little Jasmine, once the quiet shadow in her sister's stories, now proudly wore the badge as a police officer, just like her dad once did. But she didn't just enforce the law, she redefined what community policing looked like. Compassion first, justice always. As the John Harris Foundation grew, building safe homes, providing scholarships, connecting mentors with foster children, John himself remained humble. He showed up to the office when he could, answered calls from confused foster parents in the middle of the night, and visited homes just to make sure the kids were really smiling, not just saying they were. But the real honor came on a warm spring morning when Amara walked into the living room, her eyes wide and glowing. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking just slightly, "you're going to be a grandfather." Time stopped. The world didn't spin. Birds didn't chirp. The air stood still, and John Harris, tough, calloused, old-school John, cried, not because he feared age, not because he feared legacy, but because in that moment he saw it, the full arc of love. What began as a broken man finding purpose in 6 little girls was now expanding to another generation. A child would grow up hearing not just about love, but seeing it. "Do you have a name yet?" he finally asked, brushing away a tear. Amara smiled. "Sarah," she said softly. John looked away. The name hit deep. Sarah, his late wife. The woman he never got to build a family with. The woman who had dreamed of children and Sunday dinners and laughter echoing down hallways. Now, in a poetic twist of fate, her name would live on. When baby Sarah was born, the family gathered again at the same church where John had once been the outsider. This time, he stood not in the back, but in front, holding his granddaughter, surrounded by his 6 daughters, and the community that had grown to love them. The pastor raised his voice. "This family is proof that love is not a color, that fatherhood is not biology, that legacy is not built in dollars, but in devotion." Applause rang through the sanctuary. That night, sitting on the porch swing, baby Sarah asleep in his arms, John whispered to her, "You don't know it yet, little one, but your story started long before you were born. And one day I'll tell you all of it, every moment, every miracle, every lesson." He looked up at the stars and smiled. He had feared dying alone. Instead, he had built a dynasty of love, a movement, a legacy, and it was only the beginning.